president, who clearly is owned by Putin. Our democracy is under siege. He's winning, kids. This crazy, wacky guy is winning.
Is it possible that they actually have a Russian agent running the House Intel Committee on the Republican side?
Who's promoting this stuff? These right-wing talking points defaming the FBI, none other than Russian-linked bots.
Can amount to treasonous when you violate the intelligence community's mandates around classified documentation.
And sources of information are going to dry up. If you have a neighbor next door who's buying a lot of fertilizer and it seems odd to you because they don't have a yard, are you going to think twice before calling the FBI?
For wanting to see the memo, we are treasonous agents of Vladimir Putin. You probably grew up reading about the McCarthy era. You probably didn't think you'd live to see it happen again, but it has.
FBI should not go to secret courts using information that was paid for by the Democrats to open up investigations and get warrants on people of the other political party. That's the type of stuff that happens in Banana Republic.
This was a plot. This was the weaponization of the FBI for political purposes by all the people at the upper echelon of the Bureau.
You want to know the truth? I think it's a disgrace. What's going on in this country, I think it's a disgrace.
Welcome to Around the Empire, the show that takes you around the U.S. empire. I'm your host, Dan Wright.
And I'm your host, Joanne Leon.
And on today's show, February 2nd, 2018, we discuss the MemoGate, or the memo released by Devin Nunes in the House Intelligence Committee. So today, after the House Intelligence Committee voted along partisan lines to release a memo drafted by House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes, the Trump administration, under the rules, the Trump administration had a few days or could suppress the memo, but instead President Trump not only said to release the memo, but trumpeted it on Twitter.
The memo was sent to Congress. It was declassified. Congress will do whatever they're going to do. But I think it's a disgrace what's happening in our country. And when you look at that, and you see that and so many other things, what's going on, a lot of people should be ashamed of themselves, and much worse than that. So I sent it over to Congress. They will do what they're going to do. Whatever they do is fine. It was declassified. And let's see what happens.
The memo alleges, among other things, that the FBI misled the FISA court, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court, created in the wake of revelations that the FBI and CIA had been spying on Americans during the Nixon era, well, Nixon and Johnson era, actually, and created this thing called the FISA court. And that basically the memo alleged that the FBI misled the FISA court by not disclosing that the source for their investigation was the Steele dossier, and that the Steele dossier had been created by the Clinton campaign, and that Steele himself was apparently vocally anti-Trump, and therefore a political bias underwrote the FISA warrant against Trump somewhat advisor Carter Page. Now, obviously, this is broken down along partisan lines. I think the Democratic head of the committee, or what I guess you would call the ranking member in congressional speak, Adam Schiff, has strongly objected and said Nunes is doing this to undermine the investigation to protect Trump. And the liberals and other people in the media have kind of went from this as an unshocking act of unbelievable recklessness to this is a complete nothing burger and it doesn't even matter and who cares.
And they got changed just like that.
Just like that. Turned on a dime.
Yep.
So, Joanne, what's your take on the MemoGate?
Yeah, well, this has been playing out for weeks, right? And especially this week. It ramped up on Monday when the House Intelligence Committee voted to release the memo. Hashtag release the memo is the main, we're calling it MemoGate, but release the memo is the campaign, if you will, to get this stuff out in the public. And the MAGA, Make America Great Again, Trump supporters were highly motivated.
And the Russians, of course.
Oh, yeah, they're all Russian agents, by the way.
They're all Russian agents, I tells you.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I have a bunch of this is like
no. What do you think of the memo? We have to decide
what do I
upfront.
think
Is
of
the
the
memo legitimate? Is it total partisan hack bullshit? What is the memo?
I would say yes to both. I think the memo is legitimate, and I think
it's both legitimate and partisan hack bullshit.
No, not bullshit. Not completely. Oh, it's highly partisan. I don't think that the righteous civil liberties champions that they are painting themselves. I mean, I'll buy that for a minute. They just extended the 702 surveillance program. Which So yeah, I mean that's just that would be my first question for.
So do the Democrats, by the way.
Devin Nunes, I'd say, why did you guys, if you knew all this stuff, why did you just renew the 702 program? I mean, this makes no sense at all. But I think the way they're framing it and the way they may even think this way, they don't have a problem with the system itself. But, the demigods, the sovereign, sacred intelligence community that they all of Congress seems to worship or fear or both.
Hallowed be thy name.
Yeah. They are entrusted with this great power, and they're great patriots, so they wouldn't abuse it. Only a few bad apples will abuse it. And that's
of course not.
That's how they're sort of framing this whole thing.
Is there evidence? Is there a strong case that the FBI misled the FISA court? But the key issue up front is the Steele dossier, which is a partisan document, it's created by the Clinton campaign, and Chris Steele, clearly anti-Trump, fair enough. But and the people in the FBI, some of whom worked for Fusion GPS, let's not forget that, Ohr's wife, OHR's wife, who connected with Steele, she worked for Fusion GPS.
She's an FBI contractor and worked for Fusion GPS.
Now what the people on the other side of this are saying is, no, he's not. Steele dossier is irrelevant to this whole investigative matter. That Papadopoulos, whatever the guy's name is, I apologize.
George Papadopoulos.
Is actually the start of this, and that the Steele dossier. See, the opposite side is the Steele dossier is completely irrelevant. I don't buy that.
No.
But do you buy that the Steele dossier is actually the key catalyst, the instigation for the FBI investigation, or not?
They're saying that this FISA warrant was based almost entirely on the Steele dossier. This particular FISA warrant that allowed the FBI to get raw intelligence on Carter Page, and of course that always means associates to spy on the Trump campaign. Yeah, I think that's easy to believe. This stuff happened in September and October of 2016, so late in the game.
Here's the thing, and this is important for the memo. This is all context for the memo. Carter Page is this former JP Morgan vice president, which, in fairness, people should know this, like, everyone's a vice president. Like, nobody in finance ever takes a low title. But in any case, Carter Page, it sounds like he was a somebody, which is the whole point of calling yourself a vice president. He worked in Russia. I mean, I don't even know if Carter Page is a Russian agent. That's the other thing. What did you believe about Carter Page anyway? But he is like, I mean, the problem, here's my view of this whole thing, maybe just to put my bias or whatever, not bias, but just view on it, is the Trump campaign was so chaotic that lots of people who would have been vetted out of a normal campaign got, even if there was no access, like peripheral access, because all of the establishment refused to work with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so people like Carter Page, who's a nobody, and even in the Trump campaign, genuinely was nobody. I don't know if Papadopoulos was somebody or not. That remains to be seen. Like, he just said, well, I'm a PhD and I understand Russia. Like, it's not clear he had any operational role. It's not clear that he did much. And even if he does, he's one of these, like, 20,000 advisors that people say they're on the president campaign. So I don't even know if, first things first, that Carter Page was actually a Russian agent or acting as a Russian agent.
I think they're both volunteers, too.
Yeah, but even if he was, did he have any access to Trump? Not clear. So, even if that were true, so I mean, even Carter Page is a big question mark. Worth noting, Carter Page has not been charged with anything. Flynn, they got lying to the FBI, the charge everybody gets when they talk to the FBI. Like I said with John Kiriakou, never talk to the FBI. Therefore, they can't say you lied to him. He said, no, I won't talk to you. 2, they got Manafort for laundering money out of Ukraine, so not related to the Trump campaign. I haven't seen them charge Carter Page with anything. I think Papadopoulos is probably going to get a lying to the FBI charge because it looks like he lied to them.
He pled. He took a
plea. Excuse me. He did take a plea.
He's cooperating now. Yeah.
Cooperating to try to get himself off the hook. So suspect of what he's going to say, but fair enough. I haven't seen them charge Carter Page with anything. So FYI, if people don't know, we're doing this as well. We're developing sources in Russia for espionage activity. So this is kind of that gray area of international law and intrigue. So it's not even clear they're following Carter Page necessarily for a criminal prosecution. They're just following him in hopes of getting information. In any case, there's a lot we don't know about Carter Page, and we don't know this, but the key question goes back to, was the Steele dossier the source? Because if it's the source, then I think the Republicans and Trump supporters have a legitimate argument that this is a tainted investigation if the Steele dossier is the seed that grew in, it's right, fruit of the poison tree in legal term.
Right.
If the Steele dossier is the beginning of this thing, which is funded by the opposition party, Hillary Clinton campaign, then you got a strong case to dump. Then Trump, more importantly, has a pretext to fire Mueller or at least fire Rod Rosenstein.
I would agree with that. I don't know what to believe in terms of what started the counterintelligence investigation, but this really focuses in on. Let me just go through some key points in the actual memo.
Sure.
The memo itself was declassified today. It was written on January 18th. It was actually written by Trey Gowdy, not Devin Nunes. And there are underlying documents that it's based on that are still classified, longer documents. And one of the things that they're damning Devin Nunes for is that he didn't read the underlying documents. And he explained that there were only a limited number of people who could read the documents, and he designated Trey Gowdy as the one who should read them. So Trey Gowdy, the guy who wrote this memo, did read the underlying document. So that's one sort of misleading thing. But now, it's pretty limited in scope, what's in this memo. And overall, they're saying that in October, the DOJ and the FBI sought and received a FISA probable cause order authorizing electronic surveillance on Carter Page from the FISA court. Page is a U.S. citizen, served as a volunteer advisor. The application first had to be certified by the director or deputy director of the FBI. It then required the approval of the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, or the Senate-confirmed Assistant Attorney General for National Security Division. The FBI and the DOJ obtained one initial FISA warrant targeting Carter Page and 3 FISA renewals from the FISA court. It goes on about the statute. It has to be renewed every 90 days. Then Director James Comey signed 3 FISA applications in question on behalf of the FBI, and Deputy Director Andrew McCabe signed 1. Then Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, then Acting Deputy Attorney General Dana Buente, and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein each signed 1 or more FISA applications on behalf of the DOJ. And they say that, FISA submissions are classified. As such, the public's confidence in the integrity of the FISA process depends on the court's ability to hold the government to this highest standard, particularly as it relates to surveillance of American citizens. However, the FISA court's rigor in protecting the rights of Americans, which is reinforced by the 90 days renewals, is necessary, this is a key phrase, is necessarily dependent on the government's production to the court of all material and relevant facts. This should include information potentially favorable to the target of the FISA application that is known to the government. In the case of Carter Page, the government had at least 4 independent opportunities before the FISA court to accurately provide an accounting of the relevant facts. However, our findings indicate that, as described below, material and relevant information was omitted. So their whole claim here, in this memo, what they're complaining about is that there was a FISA submission to the FISA court for a warrant on Carter Page and 3 renewals, so 3 separate applications where they justify why they need to keep spying on the guy, right? And they're saying that the FISA court, they're saying in a very gentle way that the FISA court doesn't have any idea what these intelligence agencies are really doing. They rely on them to tell them the truth. And this is sort of something that's been discussed many, many times in discussions about the FISA court. So that's why they're mainly a rubber stamp.
Side note for a second on this. Now, these people have read all these documents, Trey Gowdy and Nunes, and it's presumably the Democrats as well. And they all just voted to authorize spying programs again.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi, at least, I think the Gang of 8 read all the underlying documents. I don't know who else did.
Which is to say their staff read it.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the memo. I think they all had access to the memo. I think it was set up in a special security room. So their complaint here, and this entire thing, is about how the FBI and the Department of Justice misrepresented the material, the justification they gave to the FISA court for spying on Carter Page. I think this is just one piece of the puzzle. I think there's a whole lot more, and you hinted to some of them. And then they go through 5 points. And I'll give you the key bits. 1, the dossier compiled by Christopher Steele on behalf of the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign formed an essential part of the Carter Page FISA application. So that's one biggie, which you're saying is being contested, that it wasn't a key piece of justification for even getting this FISA warrant.
It wasn't the instigating document, or it wasn't the instigation. That's what they're arguing against. Although I think, based on what you're saying and what I've read, that it's hard to take. It's one thing to say the Steele dossier is the be-all and end-all, and without the Steele dossier, there's no investigation. Therefore, it's all political hackery. And a totally complete different thing to say, which is what Schiff and these other people are trying to put out there, which is the Steele dossier is not really that relevant. You would have had the full investigation without it. I think the truth is actually the Steele dossier is very relevant, but it may not be the only source that they used. I don't know, though.
Well, it was the Republicans are claiming, and I don't know how much it's contested, that it was very relevant for this FISA warrant, that they wouldn't have been able to get this FISA warrant without that dossier. And then I'll tell you a little bit more. It's about this particular FISA warrant. The dossier formed an essential part of the Carter Page FISA application. I don't know how many other FISA applications there were, but we're talking about this one that happened in October of 2016. So a month before the election. And then it says Steele.
Wait a minute. This document. Wait. This starts a month before the election. The Carter Page one.
We're talking about a FISA warrant.
Yeah, you're saying the FISA warrant on Carter Page first started in October of 2016.
This one.
Oh, this one. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
There may be more. If there was a counterintelligence investigation on him, I don't know if there were warrants for that. So it's been like 15 months since October 2016.
Wow. Okay. And this guy's a tangential figure in the Trump campaign. I mean, that's the part that's kind of crazy.
This is why you have to read the source documents. Because if you're listening to Adam Schiff's version of things, he's going to have you all twisted up in a pretzel.
Well, yeah.
But for that matter, Sean Hannity, or
there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation.
Yeah,
and
you just you got to read it, because these guys.
Well, they can release the documents. They can release it. I mean, that's what the Democrats keep saying. Well, we want to release the documents. Okay, well, this is a misleading. Okay, well, then release the release the raw documents.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And a lot of people are saying that. Give it to us, baby. We want to see all of them.
Yeah, go ahead. Release it.
And that attitude sort of taints my whole view of this thing, because I wanted to see it for myself. I don't believe any of these people for the most part.
I'd love to see the raw documents.
There's 4 more points.
Okay, go ahead.
And they're pretty significant. Okay, so they say the first point. Let me just start this over again. The first point is that the Steele dossier was, what are their exact words, formed an essential part of the Carter-Page FISA application. Then it says Steele was a longtime FBI source who was paid over $160,000 by the DNC and the Clinton campaign via the law firm Perkins Coie. So there was a go-between and Fusion GPS. Then there's a point A here under 1. Neither the initial application in October 2016 nor any of the renewals disclose or reference the role of the DNC, Clinton campaign, or any party campaign in funding the Steele's efforts, right? So they didn't mention to the FISA judge, oh, by the way, this dossier that we're using as probable cause for a warrant on Carter Page, they didn't bother saying that it was based on opposition research funded by the Hillary camp, right? So that's a pretty big deal right there. And then B, it says the initial FISA application notes that Steele was working for a named U.S. person, but doesn't mention Fusion GPS and Principal Glenn Simpson, who was paid by U.S. law firm Perkins Coie, representing the DNC, even though, this is pretty big too, it was known by the DOJ at the time that the political actors were involved in the Steele dossier. So they set out that high-level DOJ and FBI had to sign off on this warrant, so they could see that it was misrepresenting, or it was lying by omission by not mentioning where this dossier came from. It was being presented as legitimate evidence of why this guy needed to be spied on, wiretapped, if you will, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that's their first claim is, they didn't mention to FISA court that this dossier was opposition research funded by a political campaign.
But they knew.
And they knew it. And the officials who signed...
So that's confirmed that the FBI knew that.
The officials knew about it. They were very aware of the dossier and where it came from. Okay, so point 2. This is pretty big too, in my opinion. The Carter Page FISA application also cited extensively a September 23rd, 2016 Yahoo News article by Michael Isikoff, the CIA mouthpiece, which focuses on Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow. This article does not corroborate the Steele dossier, because the article was used in this FISA warrant application to corroborate the dossier, which they had not and still haven't, proven most of the things in it. It says this article does not corroborate the Steele dossier because it's derived from information leaked to Steele himself to Yahoo News. So the old circular,
right?
Michael
this
Isikoff
also clearly shows why this deep state, if you like, uses the media. Because now they've been able to leak their own reference material, and then they use the public domain of the reference material they've leaked to continue the investigation. I mean, it's kind of
yeah. I mean,
parallel construction. It's like parallel construction through the media.
Yeah, circular construction. Cheney was, I guess, most famous for doing this.
Judy Miller, yeah,
with citing the New York Times that he had leaked information to, right? So. It probably works really well. It's pretty slick if nobody calls you on it.
Yeah. All right.
Let's see. The Page FISA application incorrectly assesses that Steele did not directly provide information to Yahoo News. Steele has admitted in British court filings that he met with Yahoo News and several other news outlets in September 2016 at the direction of Fusion GPS. Perkins Coie was aware of Steele's initial media contacts because they hosted at least one meeting in Washington, D.C. in 2016 with Steele and Fusion GPS where this matter was discussed. Now, as a subpoint A, Steele was suspended and then terminated as an FBI source for what the FBI defines as the most serious of violations, an unauthorized disclosure to the media of his relationship with the FBI in October 30th, 2016. Mother Jones article by David Korn. Steele should have been terminated for his previous undisclosed contacts with Yahoo and other outlets in September, before the Page application was submitted to the FISA court in October, but Steele improperly concealed from and lied to the FBI about those contacts. And B, Steele's numerous encounters with the media violated the cardinal rule of source handling, maintaining confidentiality, and demonstrated that Steele had become less than a reliable source for the FBI. So, they're saying, summarize this point, they're saying the Carter Page FISA warrant application not only relied on the dossier, but it relied on this Michael Isikoff news article, which they didn't admit was based on the dossier. So it's sort of double whammy there. And then they throw in here that, the FBI got rid of him as a source.
But kept the warrant going?
Let's see, when did they fire him? October 30th, yeah. So right afterwards. Yeah, but kept the warrant going. So the renewal warrants are not exactly the same as the original warrant, They don't just take the same thing and add a please give us 90 more days thing. They actually produce some more justification for keeping the warrant going.
Oh, okay.
So number 3, start name dropping here. Before and after Steele was terminated as a source, FBI source, he maintained contact with the DOJ, then Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, a senior DOJ official who worked closely with Sally Yates and later Rosenstein. Shortly after the election, the FBI began interviewing Orr, documenting his communications with Steele. For example, September 2016, Steele admitted to Orr his feelings against then-candidate Trump when Steele said he was, quote, desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. So Steele, talked to Orr and admitted that he was motivated to try to prevent Trump from getting elected, which of course they're putting this in here for the same reason that they have publicized the Page and Strzok texts to show that they're politically motivated, right? These intelligence agencies are supposed to be independent, politically independent. Sort of everything sort of hinges on that.
Yeah, imagine believing that was even possible, but yeah.
Yeah, so they're just saying, it was evidence of his bias. They're just laying that out. And they're saying that wasn't reflected in any of the FISA applications either. So if they were going to include this dossier as justification for spying on Americans, they should have at least noted that the dossier was produced by a person, partisan biased. The FISA court may still not have denied the warrant. It's just that, I guess, for integrity sake, they're supposed to disclose things like that. And then they say during the same period, Orr's wife was employed by Fusion GPS to assist in the cultivation of opposition research on Trump. Orr later provided the FBI with all of his wife's opposition research paid for by the DNC and Clinton campaign via Fusion GPS. The Orr's relationship with Steele and Fusion GPS was inexplicably concealed from the FISA court. So they didn't mention any of that either. How the Steele dossier got funneled to the FBI was through this guy Orr and his wife, who was actually working on it, Bruce Orr.
Wait a minute. When he says it got to the FBI, he was handing Fusion GPS reports from his wife to the FBI investigative team? I don't understand.
Yeah, that's the claim.
Wow. Okay.
Or later provided the FBI with all of his wife's opposition research. I mean, there's also reports that John McCain gave the dossier to the FBI. I mean, both could be true. One could be true and false.
They could have got the dossier from multiple sources. Someone could have leaked it to McCain, so McCain would light a fire, which is Fusion GPS could have done that. McCain is a total prostitute for the press. I mean, that was always been his attack from. Conservatives have attacked him for that. Everybody's attacked him for that. That he just placates the media. So maybe some former Wall Street Journal reporter, Glenn Simpson, gets in there and says, I got this document for you. Or some other contact that McCain has in the media. And he says, well, you should give this to the FBI. And then McCain says, okay.
Right.
I could totally see that happening. Anyway.
So number 4, it says, according to the head of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, Assistant Director Bill Priestap, corroboration of the Steele dossier was in its infancy at the time of the initial Page FISA application. So the FBI had only started to try to see if any of this stuff was true or not. After Steele was terminated, a source validation report conducted by an independent unit within the FBI assessed Steele's reporting is only minimally corroborated. Yet in early January 2017, Director Comey briefed President-elect Trump on a summary of the Steele dossier, even though it was, according to his June 2017 testimony, salacious and unverified. So, while the FISA application relied on Steele's past record of credible reporting on other unrelated matters.
That's FIFA. That's the investigation into the international doping scandal with the soccer, right? Is that didn't they work with him on that? That was what he was considered legitimate when he investigated the doping scandal for soccer World Cup stuff and investigating that big doping scandal with Russia.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
But I know that I think that people in the intelligence agencies knew him pretty well. There are a lot of people.
He was MI6. He used to be MI6. That's important to note.
Like John Kiriakou said, he had worked with him. He knew him.
Yeah.
And he's now, pretty surprised at what he's done now because his previous work had been, he had a good reputation. And
the money.
While
Anyway.
the FISA application relied on Steele's past record of credible reporting on other unrelated matters, it ignored or concealed his anti-Trump financial and ideological motivations. Furthermore, Deputy Director McCabe testified before the committee in December 2017 that no surveillance warrant would have been sought from the FISA court without the Steele dossier information. So presumably this is based on...
Wait a minute. Who said this?
McCabe himself.
Said that the Steele dossier was the source?
That they wouldn't have been able to get this warrant from the FISA court without the Steele dossier.
Wow.
He told them that in December 2017. Probably in one of those closed-door hearings.
Oh, closed-door hearing. Okay.
I don't know that for sure, whether it was closed-door. It may have been. I'd have to go look
I haven't
up.
heard I haven't heard that reported anhere, that
Yeah.
McCabe admitted that it was the Steele dossier.
Yeah, it's huge.
Okay.
Could be what got him fired for. We don't know. And here's number 5. It says the Page FISA application also mentions information regarding fellow Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, but there's no evidence of any cooperation or conspiracy between Page and Papadopoulos. The Papadopoulos information triggered the opening of an FBI counterintelligence investigation in late July 2016. Oh, that answers your first question. The Mueller investigation didn't happen until June 2017. So they're saying that, let me read the whole thing and then we can talk about it. It's only a paragraph. It says, the Page FISA application also mentions information regarding fellow Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, but There's no evidence of any cooperation or conspiracy between Page and Papadopoulos. The Papadopoulos information triggered the opening of an FBI counterintelligence investigation in late July 2016 by FBI agent Peter Strzok. Strzok was reassigned by the Special Counsel's Office to the FBI Human Resources for improper text messages with his mistress, FBI attorney Lisa Page, no known relation to Carter Page, where they both demonstrated a clear bias against Trump and in favor of Clinton, whom Strzok had also investigated. The Strzok-Lisa Page texts also reflect extensive discussions about the investigation, orchestrating leaks to the media, and include a meeting with Deputy Director McCabe to discuss an insurance policy against President Trump's election. Now, they're just laying out, in fact, I don't even know why this, I think they're just getting all the names into this. I'm not quite sure why they even mentioned Papadopoulos here, but
I didn't know that Strzok was the one who opened that investigation.
Yeah, he was in charge of Hillary's email investigation.
No, but not Hillary's email investigation, the Papadopoulos investigation.
He was a key high-level person in these investigations. Yeah.
And so he's anti-Trump.
But that last sentence there is a little I think it's misleading because it says that the Strzok Page texts also reflect extensive discussions about the investigation, orchestrating leaks to the media, and then, quote, and include a meeting with Deputy Director McCabe to discuss an insurance policy against President Trump's election. Now,
well, that's their word, right? Insurance policy.
Yeah, well, they did. They talked about that, but they didn't directly say Andrew McCabe. They said Andy's office. They talk about Andy's office.
Yeah, but that's who they're talking about.
Yeah, it's a 99% chance that is who they were talking about.
Well, they're going to be deposed shortly. I'm sure they'll have to say exactly who they were talking about.
And thousands. First of all, then their texts got lost.
But now they're found, right?
And then they were found by the Inspector General.
I once was lost, but now I'm found.
And this memo, there's also an Inspector General investigation going on. So supposedly, I mean, you don't know. There's so many different people putting so much information and disinformation out. You never quite know. But it does make sense that the reason that Christopher Wray wanted McCabe gone was because of the Inspector General report, not because of this memo. That's what's being floated around.
What?
I don't know if that's true or not.
But wait a minute. So what's the Inspector General report going to say? I don't know. Where's that? Is that referenced in this memo?
No, it's not.
When's that report going to come out? More things we don't know. Okay, to recap, though, real quick.
So those are the claims that are being made, right?
Which, by the way, let me just say one thing on top of this. I don't buy any of the underlying thing here. I think all this information is useful, but the idea that the FISA court wouldn't have authorized this anyway is ridiculous. They authorize everything. Like, I think if the FISA court knew that this was all a political hack job, they still would have signed off on the wiretaps because I don't think they ever say no. So that's neither here nor there in this investigation, but like, the pretext they're using to launch this memo is that if the FISA court, that information was suppressed from the FISA court, which would have like had an impact on whether they issued these wiretaps. That part is the part that's least believable to me because the FISA court is a rubber stamp. It never they have very little history of ever opposing anything. That being said,
it's rare, but it does happen. Yeah,
it's rare, and I think the FBI absolutely. I don't know if it's institutional. I don't know if it actually was partisan. One theory is that people thought Hillary was were so convinced Hillary was going to win that they were trying to do favors beforehand. I don't know if that's true, but the FBI absolutely ran a ridiculous investigation, and this is incredibly waste of time, this whole investigation, in my view. So that I agree with, and that I think the memo points to some interesting facts, like you have these, pay-to-play investigators you have these biased FBI agents. Sure. I just think that even if that was disclosing, they said, yes, the dossier we got was funded by the political campaign opposing one of the targets. I think the FISA judge would have still signed off.
Well, what the FISA court does apparently is they push back sometimes, and they just send them back and say, you're going to need to do this, you're going to need to do that, or we need more of this or that. And the government goes back and modifies it and comes back to the FISA court. It's rare for them to just say, no way.
Right. They would have just said, no, Carter Page is a private citizen. How dare you?
Yeah.
It's not very dramatic.
So immediately after the memo was released today, Charlie Savage at the New York Times has been a very vocal partisan for the Democrat side.
Yeah, he's terrible.
He's an example of one of the journalists who I thought very highly of until this whole Trump fiasco.
I've never thought highly of him because he's always been a hack.
I don't know if they published the actual memo itself, but they did publish an annotated version of the memo, which I suspect, I wonder how well with the Democratic, supposedly there's a rebuttal to Devin Nunes' memo by the Democrats, Adam Schiff and others.
Of course.
And the fuss that the Democrats have been making and the way to cast doubt on this memo is they're saying, well, you should release our memo too. But there's some complications with that because it hasn't been through a review, and I think it is going to get, I think someone has promised, maybe Paul Ryan has promised to publish it.
Yeah, Paul Ryan.
But it hasn't gone through the process yet. Plus, the Republicans, of course, want theirs to come out first. The first one's going to get the headlines, right? And this is the one everybody's been waiting for. But anyway, Charlie Savage, the New York Times published the memo, but they published it with a rebuttal column next to it. They got 2 columns, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe. So maybe 10 or 12 paragraphs of rebuttal. Well, the FBI objected to this release, and the Department of, Well, so Nancy Pelosi, though, I've got some audio clips here. Let me give people a little break from reading the articles.
Sure.
Chris Cuomo actually pushed Nancy Pelosi a little bit on CNN, which was just shock in itself. He's saying, well, why don't you, get redacted what you need redacted for your national security thing and let the public decide for themselves. And I'll just play you. These are just some excerpts from the conversation.
DOJ is only one part of the intelligence community. The intelligence community is vast. It's the CIA, the DNI, the National Defense. Everybody has their element of it. And so,
let me just interject here that Chris Cuomo has said to her, she's saying that this should have been vetted and redacted by the intelligence community or by the DOJ. And Chris Cuomo says, well, their concern is that they have a little bit of a conflict of interest, the FBI and the DOJ. So how are you going to get them to redact it? And so this is that's where this piece of the conversation begins.
DOJ is only one part of the intelligence community. The intelligence community is vast. It's the CIA, the DNI, the National Defense. Everybody has their element of it, and sources in that must be protected. But not only that, I can't even reference some words that are in it because that would be a violation of the confidentiality, the classified nature. Right. So this, again, putting this aside in terms of tit for tat, which you seem to, well, with all due respect to you, is trying to make it look like Democrats are. It isn't about that. It's about our national security. And our president of the United States is the commander-in-chief, and he should stop this immediately. In fact, he should be saying, if no release should ever happen without the agencies of the intelligence community reviewing and redacting from public review. But again, let's enlarge this issue. Let me not get engaged in this Republican-Democratic thing. This is about security or not. It's about people in our country who work so hard to protect the American people in the intelligence community and to be frivolous with their identity or roads that can lead to them.
Oh my
I'm
God,
saying you guys redact what you need to redact, but then let the American people decide.
But that's not the way intelligence works. That's not the way it works. It's not a question. This isn't a subject about what's in the tax bill or what's not in the tax bill. This is a question of what is important to our national security to be secure.
Oh my Lord!
So, again, let me take it to another subject, because they do these things as a distraction. It's totally irresponsible. It isn't one person in the intelligence community recognizing the sacrifice that our men and women in the intelligence community make for our country's security that would say this is not reckless.
Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, obviously, recently selected by President Trump. He got the memo. He could have come out and said, this is reckless, don't release it.
Let me just say this with all due respect. You really don't know what you're talking about right now.
Oh, God, what a train wreck.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is obviously before the memo was released and before Christopher Wray.
This is before it's a nothing burger. This is before it became a nothing burger.
Yeah, this is when it was.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's just.
What a nut. I mean, these people are really this pathetic, by the way.
Yeah.
It's the intelligence, it's national security. Yeah.
Is that a South Park thing? National security.
Yeah, she sounds like this kind of demented, which she is, I think.
I was wondering if you were doing a South Park impression there, because this kind of
maybe I am, because she does kind of sound
funny. Yeah, there was a complete freak out and but it was an interesting freak out because it was it was the power elite freak out.
I don't want to talk about this is Republicans versus Democrats. This is
I love that one.
That was a great one.
Yeah. So
we don't want you to understand our partisan hack nonsense, because this is beyond partisanship. It's national security. You don't know what you're talking about. All right, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's when she got really desperate, because how dare a CNN
how dare you question our men and women in uniform? And she almost went there. She wanted to say in uniform, and then at one point she almost said Democrats. How dare you question national security? How dare you? Like, you don't even know what you're talking about. Neither do you. You don't know. I thought you. What are the odds she's actually read the underlying material? 0. Her staff read it. And told her about it.
In this conversation, she said that she did, that she read all of it, and she's part of the Gang of 8, so she probably probably did.
They're all staff managed people. She really needed to retire a while ago, but
at one point in this conversation, right before she said that. Our men and women in the intelligence agency who risk their lives and all that, she completely loses her train of thought, and there's a big hesitation. She just completely loses her train of thought.
I thought the video cut out. That was actually in real time.
It was in real time. Yeah.
Wow.
You should watch the video. It's interesting.
National security. Okay. Oh, I'm stuck. Hold on. You don't even know what you're talking about. This isn't partisan. All right.
You would think as the opposition to Trump, I would think not a very.
They all voted for 702. They're not opposed to this. This is like, God, it's so pathetic. The Democratic Party is so pathetic.
Yeah, that floats over all of
us. That's why they're losing to these people. It's because they're even more pathetic. Which really, to be more pathetic than the Republicans, you really have to try.
There's this other thing going on where it's like I don't know, like a volleyball or a hot potato or ping pong. They're using the same, that projection thing where whatever you're doing, you accuse your opponent of doing that. There's all kinds of stuff like that going on there. Like right there, she uses their tactics of national security, men and women in the intelligence community. She said just like John Brennan there, but. And also,
by the way, I don't think people understand, including these politicians, I don't think there's a lot of admiration for the quote-unquote men and women in the intelligence community. I don't think the intelligence community or the CIA are like that well loved. So I think they're in beltwayitis, where they think like people outside DC who don't understand the real power of the intelligence agencies over the fate of politicians like her, because they probably have all sorts of embarrassing material on her. Like, they're not in awe of the CIA. They kind of find the CIA creepy and they're distrustful of
Wasn't
power.
Nancy Pelosi the one who stood on a stage and said that she feared the CIA?
No, it's Chuck Schumer who said you don't mess with the intelligence agencies. Well, maybe she said it too. I mean, they're all afraid of them because they're all probably doing some.
They will go after you. I'm almost certain I can remember saying. Let me just look this up. 2014, Nancy Pelosi admits that Congress members fear the CIA. Quote, "You don't fight the intelligence community without a price tag because they come after you and they don't always tell the truth. ... But one thing is certain. When your elected representatives are afraid to go after the unelected intelligence community for fear that they will be destroyed by false information." Anyway, I very clearly remember this.
So much for the men and women who risk their lives.
Yeah, I should pair these two quotes up.
Yeah, if you have video of it, especially. But is she? So she's saying. Now, was this probably around the time the CIA got caught spying on the Senate? Remember with Feinstein?
Yep.
They're risking their lives spying on Congress. They're risking their lives.
There's a gold mine. There's a gold mine of quotes from that era that you could match up with the things they're saying now. Yeah. I suspect that points from the Democratic rebuttal memo are in this New York Times annotated memo. In the Nunes memo, the first thing that he calls out is the quote, "Then acting Deputy Attorney General Dana Buente and Rod Rosenstein." Charlie Savage says, "Mr. Buente and Mr. Rosenstein are both Trump administration officials, the General Counsel, the FBI, and the Deputy Attorney General, respectively." Well, yeah, but they've been there since. They're not new hires, as far as I know. Maybe Buente is, but Rosenstein certainly is. He's a career guy.
And Trump administration officials, I mean, if you're still in government when Trump took over, you're technically a Trump administration official. I mean, it doesn't mean anything.
Under Justice Department regulations, it's Mr. Rosenstein who appointed and oversees Robert Mueller. Rosenstein controls the scope of the jurisdiction. If Mr. Trump used wiretapping of Mr. Page to justify removing Mr. Rosenstein, the president could install someone who might be more willing to constrain or end the investigation.
Good. Please, for the love of God, end this stupid investigation.
Well, that's one of the Democrats' talking points, and it may be true. I don't know. Is that
I hope it
this
is.
whole thing is about justifying, creating a pretext for firing Rosenstein. And in fact, they issued a very threatening letter. Material and relevant information was admitted. Now they're disputing that, saying, in accusing the FBI of omitting important information, this memo's critics say the memo itself omits crucial context. Other evidence that did not come from Mr. Steele, much of which remains classified. For example, it makes no note of the fact that Mr. Page attracted the FBI's interest in 2013 when agents came to believe that Russian spies were trying to recruit him in New York there. The FBI.
Okay, so this is the Democrats' memo. They've leaked the Democrats' memo because this is referencing classified material too, which the New York Times hasn't seen, which means this is the Democrat rebuttal memo that's been leaked, essentially.
Right.
Okay.
And I suspected that that's what Charlie Savage was doing here, was taking the relevant parts of the Democratic memo and publishing it this way, since it's not clear to be published yet. Taking the talking points from it.
Right.
The FBI obtained a FISA wiretap order then, as well, according to a person familiar with the matter. So that probably made it, if this is true, it probably made it easier to get another one on him, right? Let's see. And then it says the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, issued a statement saying, quote, "It is necessary to understand how the investigation began, what other information the FBI had about Russia's efforts to interfere with our election, and what the FBI knew about Carter Page prior to making the application to the court. Okay, well, if it's necessary to understand it, then show it to us, right? Because you're just saying, trust us again. And it's very clear we can't trust you. That's my gripe. They also object to the fact that when the memo mentions that DOJ and FBI officials knew who paid for the dossier, they say David Chris is FISA expert, former head of the Justice Department's National Security Division during the Obama administration, called this the money quote in the memo. The impression created by that line, he said, is, quote, potentially problematic and worthy of further review, unquote. However, he said if the application did disclose that Mr. Steele's research was funded by people who were motivated to undermine Mr. Trump's campaign, even if they did not specifically name the DNC or the Clinton campaign, quote, then the FISA applications would be fine. What? This is one of several, quote, serious mischaracterizations, unquote, Mr. Schiff's statement said, quote, the majority suggests that the FBI failed to alert the court as to Mr. Steele's potential political motivations or the political motivations of those who hired him, but this is not accurate. So Schiff is contesting that. And Schiff is also contesting the issue of the Isikoff article being used as justification for the warrant. Schiff deemed this to be another of those serious mischaracterizations, saying that the article was not used to corroborate Mr. Steele. Mr. Chris, the FISA expert, said that it was, quote, much more likely that they would include an article to show that the investigation had become public and that the target, therefore, might take steps to destroy evidence or cover his tracks. So they don't deny that the article was included in the FISA warrant application, just the reason why it was there. They were making the point that they needed this warrant because they were afraid that Page was going to start deleting things because the whole thing had become public. I know it's kind of minutia. It's what I expected.
Weak.
Yeah.
Is that the whole? Okay.
Just see if there's any. They contest the British court filings thing. They're saying it happened before, long after the initial application and at least the first renewal application. This is really weeds here. Interesting because, I personally think that the Republicans knew this was going to be scrutinized massively, right? So while I don't put it past them to be political or misleading or any of that, right? But I think they fear the Democrats. I think they know what kind of a ruckus they can cause. They know how skilled and how many skilled lawyers they have. They know that they will go after every detail. So I think they probably were careful in their wording. I don't know if they put any blatant. And it took them a really long time to fight back, didn't it? It took them like a year to fight back. This whole Russiagate thing, classified material and leaks, anonymous leaks, and broad, vague statements. And then when you get the details, you're like, really? That's the detail that allowed you to make this broad, sweeping Russia is trying to undermine our democracy thing? Just kind of like when people question them, all right, so how did Russia have the election? And once we started hearing the details of what they said Russia did, we're like, are you kidding me? So I guess just my skepticism is really swinging more towards skepticism of the Democrats lately, just based on their history on this subject. On other things, my problem is I hardly believe any of them. That's why I wanted to focus more on the source documents rather than on what so-and-so said. Although, we should talk about that's a different subject, is the reactions to all of this. So now we've gone through the memo. our audience has heard, exactly what it said. And, we've reduced the subject to what it really was about. By the way, numerous people on cable news today, which I braved all 3 cable news segments for a little while today for you guys. Oh my God, it's so bad.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just kidding, but sort of kidding. Who was it that said, this is just the tip of the iceberg? This is only one thing the Republicans are saying. There's a lot more. This is just one thing, and there's more. So I don't know if they're going to go through this numerous times. There are going to be more memos or what, but this is just one aspect that they're going after. And notice they use the opportunity to drop a lot of names. I suspect they've got a list of people, the people who were behind I don't know what you even call that fiasco after the election, all the leaks and the uproar. It was pretty clear that some people inside the intelligence community, inside the administration, had mobilized. They really went after Trump. And I think this is the Trump administration fights back. It took him a hell of a long time to do it.
I think he got suckered. He didn't know he didn't understand how much of a setup this whole thing was. And because this was a setup from day one, this entire Russia thing. I mean, maybe he screwed up firing Comey. I think he screwed up firing Comey and then not firing Mueller and just simply saying, no, there will be no special prosecutor. There will be no investigation. I'm shutting this down. I'm the president, which is what he should have actually done. Because not that there's not other things worth investigating, but this is a total stupid disaster. Now, that being said, he did hire some real idiots. Mike Flynn is definitely among them. And Paul Manafort is just the most mercenary son of a bitch in American politics. And it's hard to feel bad about them. It's hard to feel bad about their downfall.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reluctant to side with some of these people. And I won't side with them. But, I mean, if they have a valid argument, for me, it's about a bigger picture. It's a power an incumbent president and his high-level officials using the massive power of the state surveillance apparatus to undermine a political campaign during a presidential election.
And by the way, Flynn has pled guilty to lying to the FBI. Who the hell leaked the intercepted call between him and the Russian ambassador? Do we have any information on that? Is anyone investigating that? Is there any developments in a high-level national security agency leak like that? Which is who would have had to have intercepted the call was a national security agency, and then someone leaked the intercept.
I personally think, and this is my own speculation, that the people who are targeted in this memo and in this revenge operation, purge, cleanup, whatever you want to call it, are the people who were most responsible for that, all of that. But, you mentioned Flynn. I should also mention that a couple of days ago, it was reported that Mueller requested a delay in Flynn's sentencing. And I don't know much more about it than that, but I think it's interesting.
I mean, Trump's an idiot to keep letting this go on. And if he thinks the longer he waits, I mean, if the Democrats take back Congress, he's going to get impeached. They'll find a reason to impeach him. If it's not this, they'll find another reason. So he's just giving them more time. I mean, he's getting terrible advice so stupid you'd have to wonder if the person giving the advice wants him to succeed. Now, in fairness, I think there's actually was just general chaos after he came into office, with Priebus and Bannon fighting with each other endlessly, and nobody really knowing what to do, and Jared and Ivanka having their own agenda, and there was really briefly that Scaramucci guy for about 2 minutes, Sean Spicer, if people remember him.
I think that most people don't want to defend the guy. I mean, every time that I, see their point of view or think that they have the more valid argument. I mean, it's cringy, so I can understand. And anybody who talks about, and there are a lot of people in the alternative media who are saying, you know what, this does need to be looked into. This, and they, expressed support for releasing the memo, but it wasn't because they were defending Trump. It was the bigger picture, for sure. For me, it's definitely not about Trump. It's about the bigger picture. Because,
right,
I
but
mean,
are the forces within the government and the establishment? The crazy thing is Trump is such an establishment shill now. Now, maybe he was always going to be an establishment, you know what I mean? Like tax cuts and, Middle East adventures. And now apparently we're going into Syria, or we're threatening Syria with a regime change again. Like has this whole thing been about populism, or has it been about like a personality clash with establishment DC, that they just don't like him personally, or they don't like his manners? I mean, in either way, he's been actively undermined by the permanent government, if you will, whether you want to call that the deep state or anything else. And I mean, it's just completely unacceptable, whatever you think about him. He was elected. These people were not elected to anything. And they presume to basically try to undermine him. Now, in fairness, I think he's undermined himself a lot. Like I said, it's chaos. He's done more damage to himself than anybody.
But he's gotten a lot of help with that chaos, There are a lot of people contributing to that chaos, so.
Yeah, that's true.
But even without that, I suspect it still would have been chaos. It's just his nature,
Yeah, he's just like an agent of chaos.
Yeah. But we should talk a little bit more about the lead up to this release the memo thing, and then the reaction afterwards. I mean, I almost was more interested in how the different players were acting. That, to me, that's a more genuine indicator of what's going on, other than the words they say. And in the beginning, the deep state, if you will, the intelligence community, and the Democrats in this new alliance that they have, probably an alliance of convenience, they were both pushing, they were throwing just about everything they had at preventing this memo from coming out. And they even, they've been trying to shut down Nunes. They still are. They got him pulled off of, he couldn't act as chairman for a while because there was an ethics investigation against him. And that was finally cleared up. And now he's back in action. And there's Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer just called for him to step down. They're trying to get Paul Ryan to pull him off as committee chair. And that on MSNBC, they're even going this far. This is John Heilman asking this Democratic Senator, I think it's Chris Murphy, Democratic Senator in Connecticut. Listen to this.
Is it possible that the Republican chairman of the House Intel Committee has been compromised by the Russians? Is it possible that they actually have a Russian agent running the House Intel Committee on the Republican side?
I hope that's not the case. I certainly have no information to suggest that it is. I think that
doesn't his behavior speak of that, though? I mean, I'm not the first person who's raised this. He's behaving like
I'm not the first person who's raised this.
There are people in the intelligence committee, in the intelligence community, and others with great expertise in this area who look at him and say, that guy's been compromised.
Are you kidding me?
Isn't it possible John Heilman has murdered and raped children and put them in his basement? I mean, isn't it possible? I'm not the first person who said this.
Unbelievable. So they were
not the first person. I mean, they're so, oh God.
They were doing things like this and really, really ramping it up with the threats and everything. And the day before it was released, there's this podcast called Pod Save America, and it's by two former Obama administration staffers or officials. And they calmly discussed the whole thing for a while. And then they got toward the end of the podcast. And they started talking about, if people believe this stunt, they started really getting pissed off, almost like communicating to their listeners that anybody who even began to believe this Nunes memo story, they were really going to be, harassed. Listen to this.
So everything is so stupid.
That's the thing.
The world
It's
is so
stupid. It's not like you have to be a fucking genius to uncover this absurd conspiracy. Like, it's all right there. It's so fucking stupid. It is the stupidest conspiracy when I see like the fucking people from the Federalists and fucking Fox News people and all these right-wing lunatics on Twitter talking about this conspiracy and actually buying it. It's so annoying. It is unbelievable.
The argument is the FBI conspired to steal the election from Donald Trump and now is engaged potentially in a coup to overthrow him, when the facts are very clear that the FBI's intervention in the election elected Donald Trump. It's like how does this pass the fucking laugh test? But when you live in a right-wing bubble with a right-wing propaganda machine and a bunch of nimrods who are Republican members of Congress, this is what you get.
Oh, they're such idiots. Okay.
Dumb people.
Dumb people. There you go.
So that's their way of handling it, right? How could anyone possibly even consider?
But I mean, they gave themselves away in there. They're like, well, not only did the FBI not conspire against Trump, they cost us the election. We would have won if not for that damn FBI Comey letter. I mean, we would have won. So this is our narrative. Our narrative is we lost the election because of FBI interference. Don't steal our narrative.
Oh, and then today, Comey, speaking of Comey, in this age now we have Twitter, and all of the officials who freak out and, wanted Trump to be taken down off of Twitter. For instance, Jim Comey appeared on Twitter. He was on Twitter, but undercover. He called it like a I don't know, like a shithole almost. But then he decided to activate a public account on Twitter. And John Brennan did it recently too. And Eric Holder, they're all very active on Twitter now. And so here's Comey on Thursday, the day before the memo was released. He says, all should appreciate the FBI speaking up. I wish more of our leaders would. But take heart, American history shows that in the long run, weasels and liars never hold the field, so long as good people stand up. Not a lot of schools or streets named for Joe McCarthy, right? And then on Friday,
who collaborated with the FBI? Joe McCarthy collaborated with the FBI, and then the FBI took his own McCarthyism to the next level with the COINTEL probe. God, I just hope Comey trips and falls and breaks his two front teeth. I just hate that guy.
McCarthyism is one of the projection things they're doing. How
that's a projection.
They're trying to flip that now to say that the Republicans are the McCarthyites. So that's an interesting, another political consultant damage control strategy thing that's sort of crazy. And then, so anyway, the very next day, here's Comey. They've already activated the Nothing Burger defense. He says, that's it? Dishonest and misleading memo wrecked the House Intel Committee, destroyed trust with intelligence community, damaged relationship with the FISA court, and inexcusably exposed classified information of an American citizen. For what? DOJ and FBI must keep doing their jobs. There also be Michael Hayden's out there, former CIA director, former NSA director. Former CIA Director John McLaughlin is out there. John Brennan, yes, I don't think he has spoken on post-memo release, but yesterday he said, I had many fights with the congressional Dems over the years on national security matters, but I never witnessed the type of reckless partisan behavior I am now seeing from Nunes and House Republicans. Absence of moral and ethical leadership in the White House is fueling this government crisis. That guy had a major battle with the Democrats in the Senate because he tried to undermine the torture report. He spied on the Senate. That was a constitutional crisis. And Eric Holder is really flipping out. He said, people must understand what is at stake by the release of the bogus, contrived Nunes memo. It uses normally protected material and puts at risk our intel capabilities in order to derail a legitimate criminal investigation. This is unheard of. It's dangerous and it's irresponsible. Then he also said, If the Nunes nonsense gets released, unbelievable, then in some proper way, the Schiff analysis must also be shared with the public. Republicans on the committee have a duty to the American people that outweighs their desire to protect a corrupt process and individuals. So all kinds of stuff like this.
I mean, Eric Holder, let's be clear. Eric Holder was a joke as Attorney General. Eric Holder protected corrupt individuals, principally Jamie Dimon. He let Wall Street off the hook, who he worked for before he was Attorney General, and now works for again back at his old law firm, which serves Wall Street interests. Eric Holder, I mean, these people are terrible. There has to be, can't we find anybody who isn't a piece of garbage to attack Trump? Comey and Eric Holder, some of the most scummy people this country's law enforcement and justice system has ever produced. I mean, these people have no credibility or integrity. I mean,
so after all these apocalyptic warnings and threats, then one of the frequent commentators on this, another Democratic congressman, today after the flip to the Russia burger, I'm sorry. Actually, I wonder, Russia burger, that could...
Russia saw 1,000 Island dressing, right?
Anyway, but...
Russia burger, now I'm hungry.
This I just found to be funny. I kind of gave away the plot already, but... So after all the apocalyptic predictions, if this memo was ever released, after it was released, this is what Ted Lieu said on TV.
I can't discuss the contents of the memo, but I can say it's worse than a nothing burger. It's like having nothing mustard.
Imagine sitting in a room with your staff and trying to come up with a line, a soundbite to get you on the news and for people to talk about you, and that's what you came up with. People on, I mean, it's pathetic.
I know. It's just, it's crazy. And instead of it being the end of it, well, another sort of political consultant strategy kind of thing. Like yesterday, I think it was, some of the Republicans or their mouthpieces started to prepare the way that this release the memo thing might not be all that big a deal, even though they hyped it and hyped it and hyped it. They sort of started preparing their audience for the fact that it might not be that big a deal. And I think it still is a big deal, or maybe they were preparing for the fact that there's not that much in it, or that they weren't going to, lock her up because of it, things like that. That was interesting too. I just, the whole thing is, this spectacle is quite interesting, I think. Let me see if I got anything else big that I wanted to mention here before we wrap up. Well, the fact that Paul Ryan backed this, I found kind of surprising. The fact that Trey Gowdy resigned, said that he wasn't running for re-election the day before this memo came up, said he wants to go back into the justice business. So, we'll see where this goes. The Democrats are convinced that this is a premise for removing Rod Rosenstein, because Rosenstein is the only one who can fire Mueller.
Trump could fire him.
Well, Rosenstein is the one who oversees Mueller. I guess Trump can fire him, but this is how the Democrats are framing this. They think that's the motivation for this. And I think it's a good
I hope he
guess.
does it. I mean, it'd be great if that's what happened. Fire Rosenstein and then fire Mueller and then move on. I'm sick of this bullshit.
Yeah, I'm really sick of it too. I hated the Ken Starr thing, and I hate this one.
This is so stupid. It's such a waste of time. And if Trump had any idea, if he wasn't such an ignorant fool, he would have shut this down immediately when it started. He would have fired Comey and okay, we're going to appoint a special prosecutor. No, you're fired too. I'll fire everybody right now in the beginning of my administration, and then the Republicans in the Congress will wring their hands. There's no momentum behind it, and they'll just live with it. Now, the longer this goes on, the worse it is.
I was really surprised that that Rosenstein did appoint, that first of all, that Sessions recused himself, and then that they did appoint a special investigator.
Yeah, Sessions blew it. I mean, Trump is furious with Sessions, and Trump is completely right to be, because Sessions is a total goober who coughed up the ball.
I think he's more of like a coward. I think he was kind of cowardly.
No,
I don't know what they threatened him with, but
no, he's dim-witted. He doesn't understand how bad he screwed himself over. I mean, I think if he had to do it over again, he wouldn't have done it.
Yeah,
because he's an idiot. He totally. I mean, no matter whether you even agree with the investigation or even think that there's something there, which I don't think there really is, like, recusal yourself from the Attorney General's office in an investigation in the beginning of the administration that's going to suck the oxygen out of the room. Like, you're an idiot. Like, Trump was right to call him a fool. He is a fool.
I thought it was foolish too. And yeah, he was a senator for all those years. He wasn't in an executive role. And as soon as he was like ready to pass it off onto somebody else. He's
generally a fool. And I mean, I hope this is a pretext to shut this stupid investigation down, because I'm sick of it. It's been over a year. It's been since July of 2016.
Yeah,
we're heading towards 2 years of this thing. There's nothing there. They got people on bogus lying to the FBI. The charge everyone gets hit with, because if you talk to the FBI, they claim you lied to them, although Flynn probably did because he's an idiot. Manafort on stuff that happened in Ukraine, money laundering from Ukraine that happened years ago, 2014, before Yanukovych was overthrown. I mean, this is the dumbest thing ever. If Trump should shut it down now. I hope this is a pretext, but I have a feeling this thing's going to just keep going on.
Well, I always think, again, just my speculation, that the Mueller investigation, first of all, I always thought it was an insurance policy and a lever to control Trump in certain ways, because they always thought he'd be a loose cannon and they needed a way to, let's say, influence him. Anyway.
Yeah, but now it's turned around, and now he's actually destroying the FBI.
Well, I think that's why they moved so quickly in the beginning, because they knew once he got up and running, I mean, they were trying to blindside him before he had any clue of what was going on, and while all their people were still in place. I mean, they were trying to make it happen really fast, and they weren't very good at hiding that, you know? Yeah, but I think the Mueller investigation, I always wonder, like, he is going to have to walk on eggshells, right? There's so much corruption. And so many different things that you go after people for. But you have to make sure that when you go after them, that like one of your own guys doesn't get taken down in the crossfire or is not implicated. And it's probably very hard to sort things out, to find one major crime where, you know, some of your guys aren't involved too. I just think things.
Yeah, but if Trump was smart right now, given he's put himself in this dumbass corner, he should just start firing not just a few, dozens of FBI senior management. He should just clear house right now. Wray is gone. Rosenstein's gone. Well, Rosenstein's at Justice. But, like, just start firing waves of people so he has the ability to appoint all their replacements. So
the Democrats believe that this is the pretext or the beginning of the pretext for doing that, and they are throwing out.
He should do it. He should absolutely do it, because
they're saying Schumer and Pelosi. First of all, they called for Nunes to be removed as House chair, but they also wrote a letter.
In charge, which they know. So shut the fuck up.
They wrote a letter. Win an election. All the bigwigs in the Democratic Party. They wrote, "We write to inform you that we would consider such an unwarranted act as an attempt to obstruct justice in the Russia investigation. Firing Rod Rosenstein, DOJ leadership, or Bob Mueller could result in a constitutional crisis of a kind not seen since the Saturday Night Massacre." And that's all we're hearing now is, oh, it's going to be another Saturday Night Massacre. And that sort of fulfills their wishes and dreams and how they tried to frame this from the start of, you know, that Trump was going to be another Watergate. The New York Times has been framing it that way since, I don't know, the day after the election.
Yeah, this is the same playbook. So the question is, are the conservatives who have been gaslit on this, like, they've been so well played. Like, like they've stupidly stumbled into a strategy that isn't moronic for once. Like, they're like, no, why don't we just say our own thing and shut this down? Why don't we just put out our own memos and say, why don't we just say screw the FBI. And if the FBI is in our way, we just destroy the FBI. Like, this is political preservation 101. The Democrats would have done this in a heartbeat. Anyone who isn't an idiot would have done this. The Republicans got played.
I think that they think this, the Democrats think this could be a pivot, a turning point. And that would explain their really, really over the top reactions. And that's saying something because they've been pretty over the top.
No, because they've got a game going. They've got this BS game going that gets them in the newspapers and it's hurting Trump kind of, although it's not hurting him as much as they'd like. And if this ends, they'll have to actually run on real policies, which is the last thing they want to do. The last thing they want to do is run an actual campaign in 2018 on the midterms on actual policy they'd have to support because they are not a united party. So they'd love to have this Russia thing. And if Trump kills it and the Republicans in the House aren't going to impeach him, which is where impeachment, by the way, has to start. It has to start from the House. So they would then have to run saying, elect us in 2018, and when we get sworn in 2019, we'll impeach Trump for firing Bob Mueller. That is a long time in politics. So that's what I mean. He should have fired him right away. And so they would have said, okay, in 2 years when we take back power, then nobody would have cared. So instead they keep dragging. They want to drag this on until election night.
Oh, for sure.
And Trump and the Republicans are so stupid, they're letting them do it. And at the bottom of all this is a nothing burger, in my view.
Well, they fear them. And,
but this has
Shumer
nothing to do with Russia. These Mark Warner and Schiff and the rest of these posers do not care if Russia interfered in the election or not, which I don't think they did in any substantive way. I'm sure they shit posted on Twitter and did all sorts of, mildly malevolent crap on Facebook, but that didn't change the vote in Pennsylvania, Florida, and Michigan. It didn't make Hillary Clinton be a terrible candidate. So they had no real effect on the election.
That's not the reason why. Every time we drove in southeastern Pennsylvania, there were all Trump signs and no Hillary signs. It's definitely not wasn't the Russians. Weren't the reason for that.
Those Amish Russian agents.
But I do believe Pelosi and Shumer, I do believe them on one point. One is where Shumer said the intelligence community can, have 6 ways from Sunday to get you. And Nancy Pelosi saying they will come after you. And so I think that is definitely part of that's a factor here because they're acting on behalf of the intelligence community. And I think that Trump.
You think they're currying favor?
His allies fear them too. Yeah. Hell, I would, wouldn't you?
I just think I think their real fear is that they don't want to alienate their donor base, and they would alienate them if they ran a substantive campaign in 2018. So why not run on Russia? That's my view of the Democratic motivation. This is saving the DNC and the Democratic Party from having to put together a real progressive agenda, which would alienate their donor base, which is Goldman Sachs and Wall Street. They don't want to alienate them. If they can run on Russia and Trump corruption and Trump, they want to redo the Clinton campaign. They want to run on nonsense issues and not alienate their donor base while placating the left by talking about nonsense issues. Just like Hillary.
Sure,
remember those Hillary commercials about children are watching? The children are watching. I was like, this is the dumbest ad I've ever seen.
Well, sure, they've got a death grip on the control of the Democratic Party. They're going to let go of that with their cold, dead fists. But I meant that you were saying, why didn't the Trump administration act faster? And I think it's because of a legitimate fear of the intelligence community. I think that's why they didn't act faster.
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like the Republicans and Trump have finally gotten over their fear of the FBI and CIA, because maybe that's the real story of the Nunes memo, is that they're finally just striking back.
Or
once.
They came to an understanding of some sort. I wonder about that.
Well, who knows what's going on behind closed doors.
Look at his foreign policy. Look at his foreign policy. Maybe he made a deal with the neocons. He said, all right, you can have your foreign policy, but you have to help me retaliate against the people who did this to me.
Or maybe they've figured out they don't have enough to get Trump out of office, so he's going to be there for another 3 years, and they better just find some way to work with him.
Well, and he's weeded a lot of them out, right? Some key people are gone. Yeah.
McMaster is still there, which is really not confidence inspiring.
Gary.
But
all right.
In any case, all right. So in summation, while this could potentially end the endless Russiagate investigation by firing Rod Rosenstein and Mueller, most likely this lame nonsense will continue, and we shall cover it. So thank you for listening. Thank you. Please tell your friends. Please go to patreon.com/aroundtheempire. Questions, comments, want to yell at me, Dan at aroundtheempire.com. Follow us on Twitter at Around the Empire. Follow Joanne at Joanne Leon, Leon. Follow me at US Empire Show. Thanks. See you next time.
And also, if you could follow our page on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Both of those are free things. Thanks. Take care, everyone.